Hey, I wanted to talk about judgment real quick because I feel like we've been having a lot of judgment and shame, and I feel like this has been coming up a lot. Well, I mean, it comes up all the time, and when I work with people, with clients, I mean, even my daughters, when I'm working with them, this is a daily thing. And between Alex and I, this is a daily thing that we work through judgment and shame. And those go hand in hand all the time. And I feel like that is a huge thing that plays into how we interact with people, the world, our environment, how we choose what we're going to say, how we're going to dress, what we choose to eat, what we choose to, or how we choose to talk, what we choose to post, how we choose to express ourselves, um, all of that. And man, it's pretty chaotic right now. And things are getting heated. And if you follow me on social media, you can see that a lot of this is coming up because I'm not a big supporter or fan of our current president, and it's it's been quite a wild ride. Feeling as though anything I say or do to bring out a voice of logic and reason seems as though I am being a cheerleader, a voice of for our president. And my immediate um, my immediate sort of hesitation is, I don't want to post this because everybody's going to think that I love Donald Trump or that I'm defending him. But I've decided that I'm not going to do that because really, truly, my message is, and I don't want to limit my message, and I don't want to limit or withhold my true voice, my truth, right? But it's getting to be so almost like I'm repeating myself all the time because it's the same thing, really, right? The media, it spins everything and it's so creepy and it's becoming the same thing over and over and over. And so going back to judgment, right? Going back to shame and the same things over and over, I feel like a lot of that comes from such subtle things that keep us from that keep this fear in us, those beliefs, right? This fear that I shouldn't say this, or someone asks you a question, and this like immediate fear of like, what do they mean by that? Because this like conditioned shame rises up in us. Like, are you going to eat that? Or is that what you were wearing yesterday? Um, like it's this automatic response inside of ourselves of fear and then shame, and then our response is like immediate defensiveness or anger, or then we want to be accusatory or passive aggressive or put guilt on the other person. It's everything is just so automatic that because we're assuming that we're being criticized and judged because we've already have this story in our head. For instance, that Sarah's turned a corner. She is a Trump supporter, right? And it's not the case. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not backing our president. I'm not going to vote for him in the fall. Read what I write, for instance. What I'm saying is the message that I'm writing is the media is crazy. They take little snippets of what he says and they turn it into this crazy story because they already know something about you. They already know, well, they know two things. They know that he's a nut job and he has no filter and he's a narcissist, and they know you don't like him. They know you hate him, and they know that you have a very strong emotional response. So they just take all these little snippets of what he says and they create like crazy headlines and make sentences that he actually never said. And they turn them into all these stories and narrations to drive more charges out of you emotionally and to stir you and to continue to stir the pot and create more of an emotional and like polarity. And we believe it, right? Because it's the news and it's insane. And so I've been paying closer attention to all of this because, well, it's a pandemic. We're all in isolation and quarantine. And a lot of what's going on now economically for our business and also for our health, for my family, it's very important for all of us to pay attention to all of the facts much more closely. So I've been looking at all of this with a lot more discernment. And so that's what I want to get to here in a second, is there's a big difference between judgment and discernment. Discernment is you want to look at everything with, without bias, and you want to look at it objectively. That means without emotion, without stories behind it already. And you want to see things with a clear mind, so that you can make rational decisions and rational judgments based on these things. And so I've been doing a lot of that. And the more I do that, the more I'm starting to find out that a lot of the things that I believed before or thought, these stories, these narratives, are just out of the water. These things are not true. These sources that I used to rely on and lean on, I can't trust anymore, because I'm actually watching live briefings now, full on. I'm reading the scripts now, the full scripts. And no, he's not an eloquent speaker. He has no filter. I wouldn't call him super brilliant, but what they're taking from him and putting into a headline title or claiming in their news stories and summarizing as what he says or what he claims is completely not true. And again, I am not a Trump supporter. What I'm saying is, what else is the news and media claiming that is completely bogus? As I'm just using Donald Trump as an example. So let's get back to this judgment versus discernment. Our beliefs perceived, right? Let's say instead of what we believe, what we perceive, someone says something like, "Are you going to eat that?" We get, like, for example, like immediate internal response that we can't control, because there is a belief in there. There's a belief that we are starting to narrate what their thoughts are. Their thoughts could be, are they judging me for eating? Do they believe I shouldn't be eating that? Should I not be eating that? Do they think I'm fat? Do they think that I should be on this diet or that diet that doesn't have enough protein, that has too much sugar? Like, are they qualifying, the macros of my plate right now? Why are they doing that? Is it because I've put on a few pounds? Do I look fat in this dress, et cetera, right? We just start creating and narrating what's going on in the other person's mind based on our own internal belief systems. And those belief systems have nothing to do with the person or the question they asked. And it's not their fault. They just asked a fucking question. They just asked, "Are you going to eat that?" And it could be because they think it's gross. And maybe they're just like, "Oh my God, are you going to eat that? Like, are you putting cheese on your mashed potatoes?" Maybe that is so foreign to them, and that they just asked you the question. Or maybe they are judging you. Maybe they are. And that is okay, because they get to do that. It is their right. It is everybody's right. So they ask a question like, are you actually defending her? So let's just say back up. That puts you in the defensive corner. You guys are talking about something and you feel like, let's just say, your mother says blah, 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 blah. It pisses your wife off. She's complaining about your mom. And you try to bring in some rational explanation. And she says, are you defending her? You could get defensive. You could get accusatory. You could create a conflict out of that situation because that's your mother. And that it brings stuff up in you. It rises up. But she has a right to judge you for not standing up for her, for whatever it is. You don't have to read the whole entire situation. There are other responses to that. You could say, yes, I am, I am. And then explain why, while also offering her a few breadcrumbs, right? You're taking both sides. You're being rational, but you don't have to respond with any sort of adding fire to the flames. Does that make sense? There are a lot of things that bring in those automatic responses inside of us that we just start creating the narrative already before asking ourselves, is it true? So, but our automatic response or reactions tend to be, we get defensive, we create a story about that person, and we become angry. Why do we become angry? We become angry because we don't like to be judged. We don't like to be criticized. We believe it's not fair, right? We get accusatory to the other person because we want to feel like, well, if we're being criticized and that's not fair, what about them, right? It's got to be tit for tat. We get passive aggressive. That's a good one. That's a like underhanded stuff. Like are you actually going to do that? Are you suggesting that? Are you implying yada yada yada? And we can get real passive aggressive real quick. And we tend to learn that from, guess who? Our parents, our family. And the passive aggressiveness is, well, you know what? I guess I'm not going to even da. Well, you know what? I don't even want this anymore. And that can be really passive aggressive. And then we're guilting them. We're throwing guilt in there too. So, those are our reactions, and those can be very automatic. And we do that before asking ourselves, is our story true? Is this true? Are they judging us? Are they criticizing us? And so there has to be a pause, and we can practice that. And then we can ask, before these things happen, to create a list of times where we have had that story in our minds, and then it has created a conflict, and then ask, where did I learn these responses from? Like, how do you normally respond? Do you respond by getting really defensive? That's me. I get super defensive automatically. I'm a youngest of 4, and I always felt like I had to defend myself. So I get very defensive. It drives Alex insane. And so ask yourself, what are your go-to responses? Where did you learn those from? Family dynamic, etc., etc. So youngest of 4, always felt like I had to defend myself. Never could keep up. I was always too young, too little, not big enough, blah, 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 always wrong. And I was just whiny little brat all the time. So I just was always just super defensive. That said, I also, as I've gotten older and I become a mom, I've started to notice my mom is can be defensive too. And I probably picked it up from her. So take a note of that. Where did you learn these responses from, these reactions, your knee-jerk reaction to feeling like you're being judged or criticized? Second thing you want to look at, where did you learn these beliefs? Someone asks you, you're going to eat that? Is that the same thing you're wearing yesterday? Are you implying, etc.? Where did you learn the belief that these kinds of questions, very subtle kinds of things, are an attack on your character, and they have to equate to this story that you're judged, that you are less than? Where'd you learn that? What's the earliest age that you can think of, like earliest memory? Write all of those down. Who did you learn that from? What are these memories where you just started to learn this, right? And then the last thing, ask yourself, is it true? Are these facts? Is this story that you are telling yourself a fact? Going back to like that question, are you going to eat that? Do they think I'm fat? She thinks I'm fat. I shouldn't be eating this. I must look like da da da. She must be implying. Is that true? Well, someone who is very deep-seated into her or his conditioned beliefs might say, yes, that's true. So then ask, is it a fact? Do you have the facts to back up that this person is saying and that they truly believe and are implying that you are fat and shouldn't eat that by asking you, are you going to eat that? Then the answer is no, that is not a fact. So what do? Okay, well, if it's not a fact, then why would you want to hold on to that belief? That a simple question is implying something's wrong with you. Why do you want to hold on to that belief that something is wrong with you? So now's probably a good time when we ask ourselves these questions. Where did you learn these patterns? When and where did you learn these beliefs? Are they true? And do you want to keep believing them? What do they serve you right now? Other than continuing to make you a victim and continuing to drive fear into you, so much fear that you can't even express yourself, and so much fear that you continue to judge others. There's the mirror. Because you don't want to be judged, you don't want to be criticized, but therein lies that shadow, because look at where you judge others. Look in your life and how you judge other people. How many people do I see on Facebook with all of these, like their Facebook page, landing pages? They're just like one love each other, conscious living, sharing all these messages of spirituality, but they are driving such hateful messages, completely hateful. And anybody who has any sort of thought of rationality or logic, they come at me. I've experienced it with extreme judgment. So I just want to say, as an example, look at your mirror, look at your shadow of anybody who is so afraid of being judged, of being criticized, of having that belief, something is wrong with me, so rooted into yourselves that someone asks you a question, boop, something's wrong with me. Not good enough, never good enough. That immediately comes up. Look at how you judge others. That in itself should be motivation or drive to just get that fucking belief away. Like, let it go. How do you do that? Well, it's not too easy because I've been on that journey for past 5 years. I mean, I just had a huge breakthrough like a year ago. I mean, it took a lot. It took so much because I was working so intentionally on it, and then it just kept coming up a bit. But there are layers to it, and it can happen. And the first step is awareness. So just be in awareness of it. And I gave you the first steps right there. Ask yourself, where did you learn these responses? And when and how did you learn these beliefs? And where did you learn these beliefs? And how old were you? Where did these memories pop up? And are they true? Are they a fact? And do you want to keep believing it? Like, how are they serving you? And often they're serving you because they allow you some sort of power. And sometimes that power is to be able to judge others. That gives you the power. That gives you some sense of power. And I'm not judging you. I'm not judging you for it because yeah, I'm just out the gate of that. So one other response, I'm just saying one other response could be someone says, "Are you going to eat that?" You could just say, "Yeah, it's really good. Would you like to try it?" Like that's just one thing you could say. Is that the same thing you were wearing yesterday? Yep. Like just, yep. I love this shirt. In fact, actually, this is the same thing I was wearing yesterday. I didn't plan that. Um, you know, are you defending her? I'm not defending her. I just want to be able to see both sides. And, I love you. Like just some things that you could phrase differently without feeling like you're under attack and something is wrong with you and you've got to create conflict in order to rise into your power, right? There are other ways to respond and to be into your power and to express your truth, right? You don't have to withhold your truth and then attack the other person. Other ways that people respond to perceive judgment is to hide and shrivel up. And that's terrible. Don't do that. So, in closing, thank you for being in my space, allowing me to be in your space. Um, I'm I'm actually quite surprised I haven't had children run in here screaming this whole time in 24 minutes. But yeah, practice that. Just practice that and keep practicing it. I will say it took me so long to do that because I was under fire for years while practicing that. 3 children, running a business, and then one child gets sick for months in and out of the hospital, and then she gets better. Another child gets sick and moves home with me full time, in and out of the hospital. It was just one after another after another. It's really hard to be consistent with your mastery practice of this when you're in crisis mode all the time. So I will say that's just life. And it added to the flavor and growth of all of my bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I wouldn't change it for a thing, but practice, what is that belief and how do I respond? Do you respond with anger? Do you respond with getting defensive? Do you respond by tit for tat, accusing the other person? Well, what about the time or being passive aggressive, or throwing shade and guilt? How do you respond to that when you feel like you're being judged or criticized? When you feel like something's wrong with me, and creating that narrative and story of the other person, and where'd you learn that? Where'd you first feel that? And where did that belief come from? And is it true? And do you want to hang on to that? And And how do you judge people? Be honest with yourself. So, then also, if you want more help with this and like to continue exploring this, um, check in with Alex and I. Um, we're gonna get really deep with this. He's actually on a podcast now with Mike Bledsoe, and we will be on Kyle Kingsbury's podcast, I believe May 6th. We'll be talking more about this, also blending in archetypes and relationships. And we'll be talking about our live online coaching. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for all of that. I hope this was helpful for all of you. And hey, if you practice that, I would like to hear what you guys think and be honest. Send me feedback, how you judge and how you feel judged, and if you got anything out of it. Thanks. Bye, you guys. It's not ending the event. I'm trying to click.